All right, everybody, I'm coming in. Let's do this. Who wants to design some technology for dirty gloves? No hands? Oh, okay. Don't mind it. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming to my talk today. My name is Leanora Horne, and I've been working in the technology industry for quite a while. I'm sure there's some more seasoned faces in here and there's some newer faces. That's the nature of the technology game. It evolves so much. And what I've been focusing on is developing my skill set over years in different industries. And this particular presentation is very focused on the mining industry because that's where I've been for the last 4.5 years. But before that, I actually worked in a lot of startups. I worked on creating my own startup where I was making a bee board game, a board game about bees to help save the planet. I also worked on some meal kit services for people who had FODMAP intolerances. And I also experimented with not-for-profits. It's that classic thing of where you're trying to find yourself and then you find yourself within technology. And I, like many of you, probably grew up with technology as well. So I have quite a history of being a digital native, if you will. And so when I have transitioned the industries I've been in, what I've found is that there's so much change in technology. There's so many different ways to apply it. And when you think about how you apply it, you can find where you want to contribute. And that's where I want to focus some time today. The reason I stay in technology is because I want to use it for efficiency gains and I want to improve things. I really do want to tackle climate change. And I know already I can see some faces like, yeah, but you're in mining? Like, what do you mean? And I feel that. I often joke, have I drunk the Kool-Aid? Or do I know what it tastes like? Or like, what is that? But the surprising thing about working in the mining industry is that they have more than one goal. We all know money is going to be one of their top drivers, but so too is safety, and that's a big part of this course. But sustainability is huge, and they spend so much money investing in that space. And what I found when I joined this company a few years ago was that I had to challenge my thinking on what my contribution to climate change could be and how I would do that. And so in the mining space, their priority number 2 goes very hand in hand with priority number 1, safety. And so when it comes to safety in the mining space, they have assets that they look after in these very remote areas, and they want to make sure that they're utilizing them to the best of their ability, because that means they're more efficient, that makes their operations faster, stronger, smarter, all of these things, and that inevitably makes them more money. See where I'm going with this? But it also, if you make it really efficient, can also make it more sustainable because you're using less resources to drive to the same output that you were already doing before. And so that's where the technology piece comes in. You can drive real efficiency gains by making it smarter along the way. So when I joined this mining space, what I found was that the industry is legacy. It's old, but technology is the new kind of child within it. But innovation is something that you've seen across this industry in order for them to keep up. And so today, what I'd like to share with you is the approach I've taken to transforming what is ultimately a legacy industry into something that can have new technology in it through the practice of human-centric design. And human-centric design, for those who are not fluent, but I'm assuming a few of you might be because you've come to my talk, it's effectively making the human the center of what you're focusing on, always making sure that the problem and the solution that actually help that customer and that user. Knowing that those two parties might be different is absolutely fine, and that's actually part of the journey, but fundamentally looking at that human. And I know we're at a conference, you can't go a day without talking about AI. I get it, we've used AI in our products as well. It's all part of it. But the human that you're trying to help in that loop is really quite critical. And if you can make sure that you're helping them in the first instance, then your technology solutions and your AI solutions will be better at tackling that same problem. So I think it's very much connected. Okay, so in the human-centric design world, I've focused on 6 phases that I'd like to run through today. The first of which is understanding your user and your customer, what problems and pain points you're trying to solve. And I think it's fair to say some of us would have had a failed product. Any nods? Yeah. How many of those products failed because we never actually talked to the customer? Okay, less nods than I was expecting, but definitely a few in my time. When I joined this particular company, they'd had multiple products already go out the door, and they'd never spoken with the customer or user about it. They just assumed, based on their knowledge, that they knew exactly what they needed, and ultimately they were wrong. And the cost of that is that these products or solutions don't match what they need, but also that's huge time and investment by the company and the people. And I have worked on products myself where you've gone through the entire life cycle only to get to it not working or not meeting expectations, and it's devastating. It truly is, because you spent weeks, months, I spent a year on some products that still didn't work. And so taking those learnings and focusing it on the user and the customer, that's human-centric design. So we start with gathering information. And it's really common and does make sense actually to start gathering information at your laptop. Everyone these days starts with their LLM. What is this? How do I do this? What do these people think? Happy days. Please do that. But then go and try and validate or invalidate those ideas with the people that this actually affects. So once you've looked at some of that initial information, what I find is that you do need to challenge your assumptions regularly. And a key throughout the entire human-centric design process is listening. So be that listening to the data that you find in your repertoire, listening and seeing the reports that have been previously done on assets in this industry, reviewing key information that is relevant to this project, to these pain points. Many of you would have heard of things like process maps or user journey maps. Those are all fantastic resources to use in this gathering phase. And then you need to speak with the people that this tool will interact with. And what I found in the legacy industry that I was in was that the people in the business were actually a gold mine. Like that pun? No? All right, we'll move on. They have an enormous amount of information within them because they've been working in this space for so long. The mining industry has a tendency to retain the talent and then they stay there for a long time. And I was working with people who might be there 10, 20, 30 to 50 years in the same space. So they have an enormous amount of intel. But again, you can't rely on that by itself forever because it's not the same as knowing something that happened 10 years ago, which may have been a driver then, is very different to now. So you still need to be testing your assumptions out in the field. And so observation is also to do with finding environments that you can simulate that the user would be in. In my case, I was fortunate enough to have virtual reality technology of the mine. So for those of you who haven't been in it, you're replicating an asset or replicating even the pit itself, and you can go in and kind of simulate you're in that space. And I vividly remember walking to the side of this excavator and looking down and actually having vertigo because I felt it. And the reason why I was in that virtual reality environment was because we do a lot of training about how to work with and be safe around excavators in a virtual environment. So you're teaching someone how to be around this very dangerous and complicated asset before they get there. And I think that's a critical piece of this puzzle. So what environments could you go into that could simulate where your users and customers are, but it might be safer for you? Another one that we had at our disposal was what we would call a workshop. You know, like an enormous shed filled with assets that needed rehabilitation. But that meant that they were not operating and they were not down the pit. So like this example here is where you're in the workshop environment. So you could completely walk around this asset without being in its operating environment, which is a lot more difficult. And one of the tasks that we needed to achieve with the products that I was working on, and I'll run you through a few, we made some different app products, both native and PWA throughout our time there. We also made a customer portal. We worked on an AI visual solution that would monitor things remotely. And then, of course, we also developed some IoT-based sensors as well. And those 4 different categories are really different ways to tackle the exact same customer problem, which was we needed to monitor the life cycle of the steel and over time have less people involved in doing that. And when I first started, it was a pen and paper situation. And it's a 100-year-old company, so that's a lot of pen and paper to be taking on. And over time, of course, they have tried different digital tech tools. I'm not going to say that they haven't. But in the first instance, we could look at creating something like a field capture tool to capture this data. And so I'll take you into the environment. We're in this workshop, this mega shed with these steel assets, and I'm watching the team interact and do these inspections. And it's important not to interrupt them the first time. You need to see them do it live. You need to see how long it takes. You need to be capturing photos of the entire situation. Videos is also fantastic, and any written notes. You don't know what is going to be the tidbit that makes this product really sing until you're out there. And so I'm watching them do it, and I watched multiple people do it. And they would cross the asset from left to right. Some of them would go back and forwards multiple times, but they would also look front to back. And when we later went into designing how that would work in an app, it was really interesting because you could tackle that multiple different ways. From an efficiency standpoint, you're trying to create a field service tool that is the quickest it can possibly be. If you muck up how they transition across this asset, and then they take this asset from being in a workshop to in a pit where you have max 10 minutes to do this entire operation, you've lost it. Like that app's not going to work. So you really have to be able to focus on them in that gathering intel stage. One of the other key things I love to do in these first phases of the human-centric design process is to work out who needs to be sharing the information with us. And I'm not sure how many of you have worked in massive companies before, but when you get into this space, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of employees you could possibly speak to in the mining industry, just in the company that I was in, let alone the customers they speak to or the users that they interact with. And so you could spend your entire job just talking with people. And of course, that would be very human-centric design of you, but it would also be super inefficient as well. So you need to be strategic. But who do you nominate when you're a new person in the business, or even if you're an old hand in the business? Who do you find to be the right person? What we did was we actually went and spoke with the leaders in the business, and I said to them, give me your cross-section of people that represent who you think the customers are globally, so we're in 26 countries, regionally, because there are many different types of mines and different ore bodies you can mine. Also age, demographics, gender, diversity. Who is using this tool? and who also wants to be a champion of this tool throughout the entire life cycle we go on. Because I'm not just going to talk to this person one time and be done. They're going to be with me hand in hand for quite a while. So I asked them, tell me who you nominate. And that did two things. That gave them, the leaders of the business, the confidence to know that the information that we were gathering and observing was relevant to the customers and users. But it also gave them buy-in at a very key time in the journey. And then it gave us the biggest resource of all, which was a group of people we could speak to throughout the entire product lifecycle. And in that users gathering stage, it was plenty of interviews, observing them on site in like these examples that you're seeing here. But then in the following stages, they became increasingly more relevant. They were our testers, they were our verifiers, they were our people to help me curate the marketing. They were the people that rolled it out once it finished. And we'll go through those stages today. But I think what's important is that you need to establish that stakeholder group early in the piece, and then you need to let them be a partner in crime. So they're the ones who we are observing out in the field. And for those of you who have not been in the mining industry, and I presume it's most of you, the mining industry, to get out on site, is a behemoth of a task. Just for me, I had to start with permission, obviously, but health checks that take hours, if not days, to complete. I don't know if you've seen videos online, but people have like a lung respiratory test that they often joke about in TikTok videos, because if you're in the mining industry, it's a whole thing. Encourage you to watch that. So you've got these health checks that are quite intense. Then you need to be trained, and you need to have a number of specific licenses to get out on site and to look at and observe these assets. So in my case, I was going in and around assets, and I needed to have what they call confined spaces training, which takes multiple days. I also had to have working at heights training, working at elevated heights training, and gas monitoring, as well as first aid training. So let's call that a week's worth of hardcore licenses to get before I could even talk to a customer on site. Then the customer nominates you and says, yes, you may come. And meanwhile, all those licenses that I got, they were all to observe. None of them were touching it. So I can only imagine how much additional time it would have been for those team members to be able to operate in those environments as well. But if you meet someone from the mining industry, they often have like a deck of cards, but it's all of their licenses and all of their certifications. And I'm sure if you looked at their LinkedIn profile, it'd be like boom, 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 just over and over. So I had to gather enough of those to be able to be eligible to get onto site. And in the Hunter Valley, which is where I live in Newcastle, there are multiple mines out there of multiple different types. Most common is coal. And so into one of the coal pits that I went to, I've got all my licenses, I've got the customer approval, I do site inductions on the day before I'm allowed down, and of course I am decked out in beautiful yellow, the most beautiful yellow. High vis, I've got my sunnies on, I've got these enormous gloves that fit for a man, and I've got boots on that have, you saw them in a picture, jungle like paraphernalia at the top, because I'm a celebrity. Get Me Out of Here was really big at the time, and the only time you can have a woman in boots has to be celebrity themed. So I'm like fully kitted out, and then I've got my laptop, my phone, I'm like, oh my God, let's go. Go down to the coal pit, and it's a 45-minute drive down to where I have to go to watch one asset be off. And that asset, that excavator in this scenario, is down for scheduled maintenance for like 4 hours, but on that same asset, there are approximately 100 people working on it from multiple different suppliers, multiple different companies. And each one of those people has a lock. You know how in Survivor they have the torch that represents their life, and if you are snuffed, you are gone? In the mining industry, it's a lock this big with your name on it. You put that onto a harness, And if your lock is on that asset, no one can operate that asset until it is taken off. If you don't take it off, there are huge fines involved, lots of paperwork, it's a whole shebang. But you're on now, locked on to this asset. You've got people doing steel work, so hot works, as well as cool works, and then we were there for this inspection of the steel product that we sell. So we're walking around this asset, and I've done this observation in the stages before, and I'm hoping that what I'm imagining the solution will be will match what I'm seeing on site. It doesn't. Because nothing is like going down into that environment. Nothing is really like it. I was sweating through my high-vis. There are flies buzzing around. I'm trying to take a photo and looking like a freaking boomer, like, I don't know how to, come on iPad, come on. It's just impossible. Let alone the fact we were completely offline with no reception down there. So I'm taking all these notes, my tidbits, and I'm pulling them back and I'm thinking, all right, I really have to be aware of this. And I watch my teammate complete the inspection and then have to write notes about what he has seen because he needs to provide a customer a report of what he has just done. We take our locks off. Oh my gosh, here we go. And we then have a 45-minute back journey back out of this thing. And that was one inspection. And they do that every 6 weeks on multiple different types of assets all around the world with a huge fleet of team members in it. So I was very fortunate in that space. But I've also been into these pictures here. You'll see this is a different area of the mining environment called the processing plant. It's where they've taken all of the ore that they've dug out of the ground and they're now going from big to small. And it's similar, all the inductions, all the high vis, the whole thing, but now we're wearing gas masks because we can't breathe down some of these tunnels that we're in. So I've got this like really intense Darth Vader situation going on, trying to take notes on how I'm gonna make an app that's gonna work with this environment. It's also the same environment where we had a lot of our IoT devices. So when we were building our hardware, we now need to ruggedize these products to be so easy to use in an environment that is dusty and hot and offline, and it's the whole thing. So I have to think about what tools and products and cables and connectors are going to be the right fit for this environment. And you're looking at things like ISO certifications and how waterproof it is. Can it be washed down? Things like this. And it's quite intense. It's a lot to be considerate of. But fundamentally, I'm there so that I can observe our team members out in the field. And I want to make a product that helps them be safe in the field. So let's imagine then that we've gathered all this great intel. We've collected it in a multitude of ways. We now need to demonstrate that that information is accurate, is reflective of what we're trying to achieve, but also don't forget that I'm one product manager out in the field watching all these amazing people. I have a whole team of people that are relying on the information that I have gathered to build something fantastic. And given that we're at a software conference, I'm feeling like some of you are going to be building these amazing things. I have an enormous responsibility on me to communicate with you what I have learned to the best of my ability. And I'm always hoping to get you out with me or in those simulated environments that are potentially a bit safer. And if nothing else, gathering those amazing humans who showcase to me what it's like in the mining industry and bringing them to you so that you can have exposure. But as a team now, we have to demonstrate that we know what the heck we're doing and that we can play back multiple solution types. I told you before that over time we created multiple different products. I remember the very first one, the app-based product. We had multiple teams saying, I need an app, I need an app, I need an app. What if the app's not the right play for what you actually need? What if we need to go into other solutions here? What if it's not even a product we're prepared to make? Could be a product that we purchase from a competitor or from a different supplier, but we integrate with, and that's going to be our thing. Demonstrating to these users that we have heard the problem, we've understood the problem, and we have solutions for it can take quite a bit of effort. And an easy way to do that is through prototyping, which is very human-centric design. There's loads of ways to prototype, and with the number of tools we have in coding and the expertise I'm sure we have in this room, you can whip up proof of concepts in no time. Before you do that, I do recommend that you play it back to them in visual ways, because that was really helpful and it's really cheap and really time efficient. So you can do it in tools like Miro, which have fantastic templates available. I've done some fantastic paper-based apps, like where I cut out what looked like a phone and be like, let's flip through my fake app here. We've also done prototypes in hardware where you would be looking to get any tech, no matter if it was ruggedized or not, and pull it together to make a little pilot of what you were trying to achieve. Or with our AI solutions that we ended up making, can you take a tiny data subset and work with a model that could play back what you were seeing and what you were hearing? And of course, ultimately, I want to get to a prototype that they can look and touch and feel. And so we've done that in our office, right? We're going to have to go back to these crazy environments to make sure that this would actually work. And when I showed you that image earlier of the walking in front of the asset and walking to and fro, it was baffling to me how every user did it differently and how we could tackle that in so many different ways in the app. And think about just even the hierarchy and the branching of all of these sub-products they have to assess. We had a crack at this app 3 times, I shit you not. And the first time, we were like, oh, they can select what they want to inspect, and that'll be the way to go. No, that was too inefficient, because even if you selected 5 out of 10 things, it wouldn't let you proceed until they'd done it. And if they didn't do it, for some particular reason, they were inhibited. The second time we did that branching structure, we grouped them and said, you will go through these ways and do it. And the last, and thankfully the most successful, was they had an option of multiple subsets at any given time, and it did replicate, but we had to standardize the process in order for them to do that. So there was a little bit of us forcing their hand, but mostly we were trying to reflect what they were doing on site. With the hardware, what was interesting with that and demonstrating our technique there was that we could quite easily whip up a proof of concept, and we could prove that you could monitor this lifespan of the steel products as it wore down. But it was really hard to ruggedize it, and then it was even more challenging to ruggedize it for these insane environments and make it easy to use, because these people that we were working with, fantastic as they are, they don't have the same tech skills that we do. They're not fluent in IoT devices. So anytime we would play back to them, here's how it could work, we would get an enormous amount of pushback on, like, how will I make it work? And they would always say they wanted to plug and play, which I thought was actually really interesting at the time. I remember thinking, like, yeah, just plug and play one thing, put it in, done. And then we get to the next phase where we're demonstrating and practicing things with them. And they were like, I don't want to plug things in. What are you talking about? I'm like, you have asked me for plug and play for legit a year. So we've got you a plug. No, they weren't happy with that. And so that's this iterative conversation that you're in with them. You're always listening. You're always learning. Now, as we demonstrate, of course, I would be remiss to say we're not going to demonstrate some code. Of course we are. I love showcasing the code, I love having the team of developers able to see what their code is doing with those users. And I love it when our demonstrations have an interactive component that they can take away and we can get some more feedback on. Can't always control that. Don't even always have a full set of features to demonstrate. Those are not problems to me. They are just opportunities to showcase to the users and the customers different ways we can tackle this problem. I also think that when you're in a demonstration phase, you're trying to articulate to them that you have understood why they are doing this task and how important it is for them long term. So it's important to replay back to them success metrics that you will be judging yourself against throughout the entire project. Once you get to the end, you can then say to them, these were the things we heard, these were the things we agreed would be success, and here is how we attained them and achieved them over time. And that makes the conversation a lot easier in terms of ensuring that your product or solution is going to match what you need to at the end of the day. And I wonder if, I don't feel that the mining industry is unique in the sense that you need to constantly demonstrate to the user that this tool is worth their time, this tool is worth using. One of the things I can remember really well when we were in the demonstration phase was I remembered that one of our users, all of the users, would write this report when they were coming out of the pit based on the inspection that they had done. In the first instance, they were trying to type it on their phones, which obviously with gloves on is like impossible. So we pitched them recording or with, transcription. They were like, I can't click it. This is great. This is great for me. Then I remembered they had that 45-minute drive out of the pit. Maybe they could write something on their phone then, assuming that they're the passenger princess that I am. Maybe they could do it then. I also learned that they do it when they're at the airport coming back from the location. So they no longer on their phone, they're actually on a computer device. Oh shit, okay. We could open up a whole different solution here if we changed it to a PWA app, progressive web app, and make it available on multiple device types. Okay. Then we thought, how do we demonstrate that value to them? And so we're replaying it back in these scenarios. But really what they wanted was the report at the end. And they were all saying all along that they wanted it automated. Have any of you coded a completely automated report? That's a full-blown trek. We did that at least 3 times. First time, we were like, absolutely, totally in scope, totally funded, definitely going to do that. We did it last. It definitely got cut, did not complete, did not satisfy customer. Second time around, okay, we're building this thing first. We are going to make the best report you've ever seen. They said that they loved it. We were like, amazing, can't wait for this. I realized we could be down in the pit, do all of your inspection offline, in the phone, come back out of the 45 minutes, they write their report memorandum, they hit online, now they get the automated report. They're going to be so happy. And they were. Except we had so many challenges with going from offline to online. Have any of you ever tried that? It is a trek. We spent months just in that little, I've got this amazing report, this amazing user journey, they feel fully heard, everyone's gonna love this thing, and then this goddamn report. I used to have to showcase to them the little Wi-Fi symbol because they were freaking out thinking that their inspection had just gone into the ether. And I was like, no, it's still here, it's still syncing. We asked them to manually sync. I have never had so much negative feedback in my entire life. Cannot believe you would ask me to press one more goddamn button so I could get this report. No way. Okay, we try again. Now we're in this playing phase, right? And playing is practicing, practicing is testing. I'm practicing this offline to online report as many times as we could. In the office, in the online environment, I'm going into the offline environment, turning on airplane mode. I'm like testing the shit out of this thing. It is going to work. I've got my high vis on, got approval to go to another site. Let's do this. I forget, as the product owner, which is just the dumbest thing I've ever heard, that I need to log on before I leave my online environment and go into the offline environment. So I cannot log in to my own goddamn app in the field. Mortifying. I've convinced this guy to take me down there, and it is just not working. So I can't test all the beautiful things we have been curating. I just, we left, we got a schnitzel. It was like, let's just leave. I just can't. But we kept coming back. And we kept showcasing to that team, we will make a solution that works for you. Now let's compare that then to the hardware, right? To the hardware tools we were creating. We had amazing tech. We figured out how to ruggedize it. I've got a couple of plugs, not many, but a couple. And we now need to test that out in the field. And we know it's going to be offline again. We know there are going to be remote environments. I've learned my lesson. We are logged in. It's all going to be fine. We get down there. We install the entire solution. Takes hours, takes multiple team members. We walk out and we're like, all right, this is it. Turn it on. It doesn't turn on. Deep breaths, Leanora. Everything is going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine. We run the cable again, 100 meters of cable down a remote tunnel in a processing plant. The cable has been cut before we arrived on site. We cannot access it because it's operational, and we will not be able to access it for at least 3 months. I'm going to say that was a win. Was that a win? I don't know. But I've never been more humbled by goddamn cable in my life. We walk out of there, still reporting all of the things we had done well. Our vanity metrics through the roof. But the customer still knows how much we're showing up and playing with our technology to make sure it is fit for purpose. So there's still a comfort in that, really. All right, another example. We are making brand new IoT. We don't have proof that this works in the field, but we've been given access to a customer's remote site and their asset. Our lab tests, excellent, naturally. Our simulation tests, bang on. Our remote tests, offline at the client site, but not in the asset, also excellent. We have no proof to date this thing is not going to work. We install it. It's working. Okay, everything is good. We try to make a firmware update before it goes live. It breaks it all. We have one sensor left working. And the team out on site have been given every tool we can think of that you could possibly need for a scenario, but none of them have firmware-based training. I don't even have firmware-based training. So we have to tell them remotely how to break open this extremely ruggedized technology that we've been building for forever to reset it on a button on the inside. They do it. We're super stoked. Now none of us don't want to update the firmware because we're terrified. We're going to brick another one. We let it run and it starts collecting data. Everything is okay, but we still don't have the success metrics that we originally agreed. But we now can't access that asset again for 3 months. And we have to figure out what went wrong, how to fix it, and all the different things you can do from a technology perspective. We figured that all out in a week. And then we're just twiddling our thumbs, waiting till we get access again. But as disenfranchising as that may sound, and has hopefully a little bit funny the way I presented it, That was terrifying for our team. That was so difficult to go through. And all we wanted that whole time was to create a solution that would help them. So in practicing phase, I cannot stress enough how important it is to continue testing and playing with it, no matter how hard the adversity is. Because if you do not test it in that phase and you go straight to presuming that your tool will work offline perfectly every time, that every plug will be easy to plug in, that every cable will be connected, that like all these things, you're going to end up in a solution where you execute a product that just doesn't match. So we move into execution phase. Let's presume that all of those learnings have come to roost and we are nailing it as a team. We are preparing to deploy and send these products out into the world. For our dev team, my kind of 2 cents is I need to leave you alone because you are busy. I need to prepare training content and marketing content that can supplement the excellent development work that you've been working on and continue to showcase to our customers and users that it is working even up until those final days. And what I think is really interesting about having worked with all of those users and customers throughout the lifecycle of the product to date is that I and the team have been providing them video showcases. So I've got some video content I can leverage. I've been training them on how to use the product. So a lot of that time that's recorded, or I might have written it down as well, potentially. I've taken a boatload of photos of the scenario so I could train our team on how and what they're doing out there. And I've also been making sure we're always listening, replaying back and validating the issues and concerns that they have. So I know they're common questions. And I also know why we were doing this in the first place. All of that fantastic knowledge is amazing when it comes to training up the next team members and writing marketing content. And so our knowledge repertoire as a team can now be completely utilized for promotion of that product. And then I go back to the stakeholders that have always been a part of our team, who've always been there. They are what I would call a champion of the product. They have told us what's wrong with the world. They have told us their ideas. They've been involved in design. They've tested it. They've taken us out to site despite all those challenges. And now they are at the point where they are confident, because we are confident, they are confident, we are confident, they are confident, that the product is going to work. And they've got all this amazing marketing collateral that they have been able to see us write and be a part of. They now need to take this to their teams and roll this out. And in an industry as big as mining, when you're operating in 20 plus countries around the world, that's a lot of strategy that goes into how you will train up thousands of people to use your new tools. The app's one thing. The app people can comprehend. The web portal, okay, I understand what's going on. You tell those people about an AI interface that they need to be working on, and they need to take that data and use it for their world. That's like hard to comprehend. So you need these champions who've been brought along your digital journey to showcase to them why they can trust it. Naturally, their first question is going to be, is it going to take my job? That's a really difficult question when in this space, part of why we did it was to make it safer. How do you make it safer? You remove a human from the scenario. You're taking that person who was using pen and paper, who maybe transitioned to one of our 3 apps, and then you're saying, completely override that, let's do AI now. Let's take a model that's going to look at it visually instead, and you no longer have to be there. That's scary. And what I did was speak with the leaders in our team and in our company. And I said, is there a way we can move their skills from being about this inspection, collation of data, to be about interpreting the data and using more than just the AI model? Because the AI model would do a lot of that initial interpretation for, from a computer perspective. But it couldn't synthesize what to do with that intel once you had it. What would the implication be on these mining operators or for their maintenance schedule? And sure, there are pieces of that you can extrapolate and move around, but utilizing that intel across the mine is what our bread and butter was. That's their expertise. That's the gold mine of people's information that they had right back at the beginning. Not all of that is automatable at this time. So you can have these champions who have been involved in your development. They know where you're trying to go and the intent behind it. And we worked heavily with them to make sure that they gave their teams the information that comforted them, that helped them operate these fantastic tools and grow over time. Give them the confidence that their job would change, even if in one sense it felt eliminated, but in other sense it was boosted up. And the reason I mention that is because we are responsible for creating amazing tech, supplementing processes, changing processes, eliminating processes. All of those things are really important to the process. But we still have a human that we've worked with that whole time. And I, like many of you, can't wait till AI takes over and I can be at the beach doing absolutely nothing. But it is still our livelihood, and it is still a concern for a lot of people. And it may very well be the reason why they don't take up your tech at all, is because you have not addressed key concerns that they have. The last phase, once you have launched that bad boy, that amazing thing you have done, is to continually review it. And I don't mean review the code every day. I don't mean look at the, tell people to go and use it and then hope that they do it. I mean creating and understanding how to measure success. We created those success metrics earlier in the process. Now they come into play. Have we met the brief of all of those specific needs? Are they staying up to standard? When we go back into the asset after 3 months, is it still operating at the level that you expected? Are we seeing users adopt this technology over time? Are we regularly getting bugs back, not because the code is bad, but because they've used it and have found something none of us found? Are we getting suggestions for feedback that we can take on? Are we still listening to their feedback, even at this point in the game? Or have we deployed the code and forgotten about that the product still needs to be maintained after that? Have we accounted for the business as usual work that will need to continue? And I encourage you to think about those users at the very beginning, those champions that are out there sharing it with their teams, the users and customers who have taken on this technology throughout the journey. And it's now going from just a handful of people to your first 10, to your first 100, maybe 1,000. I still remember the first time I saw someone use a product solution that we've made where I hadn't told them to use it. Ooh, that was crisp. That was an exciting day. But then I was terrified because I realized they were using it wrong, and all this collateral and all this champion, all this human-centric design wasn't actually meeting it. And initially you'd think, oh, I'm disappointed. That's not what I set out to do. And I took it as an opportunity to learn, to iterate, to make sure that we're constantly evolving this product and solution to match what those people need. There's always an opportunity if you're thinking about the human-centric design that is part of the process. So today I've walked you through a number of different human-centric design practices, but I've also shared with you some stories about what it's like to be out in the pit or out in the mine or the processing plant. I wonder if within this room we could come up with other environments that this would be just as relevant, but not mining. Could you think about what it's like to be in a hospital environment and the number of different sensors and tools and apps and things that are expected of the user? What's it like to be the person in the bed? What's it like to be the nurse, the doctor, the team working on these solutions who need to use it every day? How are we listening to them throughout the process? What can we do that will make it easier for them? What about if we take this to construction, out in the construction field? How many people are going to be using different tools, sensors, apps, websites, databases to also look at their maintenance strategies and their optimization? What if we take this into the renewable market? How many amazing pieces of tech are being made in that space that require an understanding of someone to go out to the site to install it, to maintain it, to operate it? If you're the managers of these businesses, how do you gather enough expertise and enough information to share with your digital team to really solve these problems? I think it's really important to focus on who that user is and what they are trying to achieve, because it helps ground the digital team into what we're trying to achieve for them, and it helps validate it so that it will ultimately work. The last thing I want is for any of you to create a product or solution where it doesn't get used at the end. It is truly disheartening. I want you to be able to live with confidence that you have met what those users needed all that time, that you have helped them throughout the process, and that you could go onto any difficult, heavy industry environment, any construction site, any hospital, any renewable space, and be able to be there confidently saying that this meets our users' needs. And I remind you again that as we move into more progressive technologies, as we adopt them in every day, and you're hearing about that at every talk today, how are you making sure that that human is respected and that their knowledge and expertise is being used to fuel products in this industry that will last a generation, or maybe a year in this kind of climate technology world that we live in? Hopefully today I've given you some tips on what tools you can use. I encourage you to research more, and I encourage you to ask questions and listen. And that brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you so much for your time today, and I'd love to open up to questions if you would like. Yes?
For sort of smaller scale solutions or feature requests, is there tips and tricks on how to sort of condense the process to make it the cost-benefit ratio right?
Yes, that's a great question. In this scale that I was working on, you needed a lot of validation. You would still need a lot of validation even if you were running a small scale piece, but you need to do it quicker, and I totally appreciate that. So my advice is to pick out the pieces of this puzzle that will validate it the quickest. And there are a couple of tools I've used, a validation iteration model where you can actually write out your assumptions, kind of like on a board or something like that. And you would rate them based on which one is the highest risk or the biggest impact negatively should that assumption be correct or incorrect, depending upon how you make the product. And you go through and you validate them that way. So what things would help validate or de-risk that top one? Could be totally different in every scenario, but let's say it was mine and I wasn't making the products for a few thousand people, I was making them for 100 or a small scenario. Maybe the simulation would have been enough. Maybe the initial workshop visit would have been sufficient. Maybe it's the testing is really where you need to put your energy, because it's not in one design, it's multiple designs. I mean, it's a fluid answer, and I know that's not always what we need, but the nature of the game is you are going to be best placed to assess where you need to put that energy and resource, and I'm hoping that the people that you bring along for that journey will also help you get there. Because if you are listening to the users in your cross-section that's relevant for whatever the field is you're in, they are going to tell you where this is going to break, where this is going to fall apart. They're going to tell you that 2 plugs is not sufficient. They're going to tell you. You just have to be listening. Yeah.
Out of interest, who was your first design partner, and how receptive were they to the changes that you're proposing on right now?
The first design partner that we use a lot of outsourcing companies. We did have some designers in-house as well. When I came on board and the first product had failed, because they didn't speak with anybody about it, they had to be receptive, not because they wanted to be receptive. You know, the business was like, not again, you know, fix that. So I think that there are some partners who are willing to come on that journey, and there are others who are not. And I think that's also part of what like your role is, or my role was as PM, or the role as development, is to be challenging that. Do you have an example of like when that happened with you, or?
Just generally working with design partners, there could be a bit of back and forth, and maybe they get frustrated with the process of back and forth.
I mean, our team still got frustrated with it. You know, we built that to and fro 3 times, built the report 3 times. Like, people were pissed, you know. But also, we were still trying to nail it, you know, and we were still all in it together to solve that key problem. That's why I think we use so many lo-fi tools in Paper and Miro and all those things to validate it as quickly as possible, because if you were waiting for a proof of concept every time, sometimes that can take a long time. So iterate quickly is definitely a piece of the puzzle I would recommend for you. I think we're almost out, but last question.
How do you handle when your champions are no longer with the company for whatever reason? So maybe that's because they retire, they leave, any other reason that might happen, and maybe they move teams all of a sudden. How do you handle when you've lost your biggest champions for your project?
I think that's a great question. And so in your scenario, they've left. In the scenario that I was looking at, we had a number of senior executives who will be at that top level, and then they've nominated a few people. It's very frequent that they would not be able to come to the meeting because they're so busy from whatever it is that they're regularly doing. So at that point, I actually asked them to nominate a backup for all parties. And I also got them to nominate the decision makers. So I think in that scenario, if you have the backup, you've got a person who can always come into your meetings, and hopefully if that first person left or retired, that second person is already ready to go. But in the scenario that both of them left, I would ask those original people, could they nominate someone else? Or even better, within the group of stakeholders that we had for each product, when one of them wasn't there, I would ask them to reflect their opinion of someone else, even though that's not their modus operandi. So you end up getting quite a great kind of collaborative nature of all of those people trying to contribute. But those stakeholders go on holidays at the exact time you need them. I have no solution for this except the subbies, the backups, and great communication and great planning and rah, rah, rah. Thank you all so much for your time. Please connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me, and I'd love to answer your questions anytime. Good luck.